The sun hung merciless over Scorpion Gulch, a furnace god that showed no mercy to flesh or stone. Martha's mother gripped her arm with fingers like talons, dragging her deeper into the ravine where even buzzards circled warily. The older woman's face, weathered by 40-odd years of Texas sun, showed nothing. No sorrow, no regret, just the hard determination of someone ridding herself of damaged goods. "This is where you belong," her mother spat, shoving Martha against the scorching rock face. "A barren woman ain't no woman at all. You're cursed, girl. Been cursed since the day Dr. Hayworth said you'd never quicken with child." Martha's knees buckled on the sharp stones. Her dress, already threadbare from years of being the family shame, tore further. She tried to speak, but her throat was parched from the mile-long walk without water. Her mother had made sure of that. "Mama, please." The words came out as a rasp. "Don't you mama me?" The older woman's boot connected with Martha's ribs. Not hard enough to break anything, but sufficient to drive home the point. 23 years I fed you, sheltered you, waited for you to prove your worth. 3 years married to Samuel Briggs, and not even a miscarriage to show for it. Now he's gone and taken himself a fertile bride. And here you are, back on my doorstep like a sick dog. The other figures emerged from behind the rocks. Her brothers, Jake and William. Their faces carved from the same unforgiving stone as their mother's. Even her younger sister, Lucy, pregnant with her second child at 19, watched with cold satisfaction. "We talked it over," Jake said, his voice flat as hammered tin. "Can't have you bringing your curse to Lucy's babies. Can't have you spoiling the family name more than you already done." Martha pressed her palm against the burning ground, trying to push herself up. The rocks bit into her skin, drawing blood that dried almost instantly in the heat. Above, the buzzards descended lower, their shadows crossing her face like dark promises. "You're leaving me to die?" It wasn't a question. Her mother untied the water skin from her belt, held it up so Martha could see the moisture beading on its surface, then poured its contents onto the cracked earth. The water disappeared instantly, swallowed by the insatiable ground. "The Lord gives and takes away," her mother said. "He saw fit to close your womb. Maybe he'll see fit to open the earth and swallow you whole. Either way, you ain't our burden no more." William stepped forward, and for a moment Martha thought he might show mercy. They'd been close as children, sharing secrets and dreams. Instead, he grabbed the remains of her dress at the shoulder and yanked, tearing the fabric until it hung in tatters. "Animals don't need clothes," he said simply. The humiliation burned hotter than the sun. Martha curled into herself, trying to preserve some dignity, but there was none to be found in this place of abandonment. Lucy tossed something at her feet, a piece of moldy hardtack, the kind they fed to dogs. "So you don't die too quick," Lucy said, rubbing her swollen belly. "Wouldn't be Christian to let you starve immediate like." They turned to leave, their boots crunching on the gravel. Martha found her voice one last time, raw and bleeding as her palms. "What will you tell people?" Her mother paused but didn't look back. "That you ran off with a traveling man. Happens all the time to shameful women. Nobody will question it. Nobody will care." And then they were gone, their figures swallowed by the heat shimmer rising from the desert floor. Martha lay there, feeling the sun strip away layers of her skin like a patient craftsman. The buzzards landed nearby, hopping closer with obscene curiosity. One pecked at the hardtack, found it wanting, and fixed its black eye on her instead. The gulch walls rose around her like the sides of a grave. Scorpion Gulch, named for the creatures that killed slow, with poison that made you beg for death. She'd seen a man die from a scorpion sting once, thrashing and foaming while his family held him down. At least that death had witnesses, prayers, a burial with words spoken over the grave. She tried to crawl to the thin shade cast by a boulder, but her strength failed halfway. The ground burned her exposed skin, raising blisters that would never have time to heal. Her tongue swelled in her mouth, a dry, useless thing. The piece of hardtack lay just out of reach, covered now in dust and ant trails. This was how the West swallowed women who couldn't fulfill their purpose. not with Apache raids or cholera or childbirth, but with the quiet cruelty of their own blood. Martha had heard stories of women abandoned for less, for bearing only daughters, for talking back, for letting their beauty fade too quick. But those were whispers, campfire tales. She never thought she'd become one. A scorpion emerged from a crevice, its tail curved in a question mark. It skittered past her outstretched hand, uninterested. Even the thing that gave this killing ground its name wouldn't grant her the mercy of its sting. The sun tracked across the sky, and Martha's world narrowed to the space between breaths. Her skin, fair despite years of ranch work, reddened and peeled. Blood from her scraped knees had long since dried to brown crust. Flies found her, drawn by the salt of her tears and sweat. She thought of Samuel, her husband of 3 years who'd grown colder with each passing season of her empty womb. The nights he'd turned from her in their bed, the days he'd stared at other men's children with hungry eyes, the morning he'd packed his things and ridden off without a word, only to return married to the Hobson girl, 15 and already showing. The memory gave her enough anger to move a few more feet, dragging herself toward a cluster of rocks that might offer shelter when night came. If she lived that long. Already the temperature was dropping as the sun sank toward the horizon. And she knew the desert's other cruelty, the cold that came after dark, just as killing as the heat. Her fingers found a small depression in the rock, pooled with the yesterday's rain. She pressed her cracked lips to it, sucking at the mineral-tasting moisture, but it only made her thirst worse. A rattlesnake's warning buzz sent her jerking back, heart-hammering. The snake, coiled in the shadow she'd been seeking, regarded her with lidless eyes before sliding away into a deeper crevice. Even the serpents wanted nothing to do with her. As twilight painted the Gulch walls purple and gold, Martha finally understood the full measure of her family's cruelty. They hadn't just left her to die. They'd left her to die knowing she was unwanted by everything, even the desert's predators. A barren woman in a barren land, rejected by both. She closed her eyes, feeling the first touch of night's chill on her burned skin, and waited for whatever would come, death, madness, or morning. In the distance, a coyote howled, and its packmates answered, their voices echoing off the canyon walls like the laughter of ghosts. The morning sun found Martha still breathing, though barely. Her lips had cracked like dried clay, and her eyelids were swollen shut from the burn. She lay curled against the rock face where she'd dragged herself in the night, her body a map of cuts and blisters. The buzzards had returned with dawn, patient as undertakers. She didn't hear the children approach. Their bare feet made no sound on the desert floor. It was the sudden coolness of shadow falling across her face that made her force her eyes open, expecting to see death's final messenger. Instead, 4 faces peered down at her, dark eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. Children, Indian children, by their dress and manner. 2 boys and 2 girls, the oldest perhaps 14, the youngest no more than 9. The eldest boy said something in a language Martha didn't understand. His voice carried no threat, only wonder. He carried a woven basket on his back, half filled with desert plants. The older girl held a clay water jug against her hip, while the younger children clutched smaller gathering baskets. Martha tried to speak, to beg, but only a rasp emerged. The younger girl, she couldn't have been more than 10, immediately knelt beside her, chattering rapidly to the others. Her small hands touched Martha's burned shoulder, gentle as butterfly wings, and she made a sound of distress. The older boy seemed to argue, gesturing back the way they'd come, but the older girl set down her water jug with decisive force and spoke sharply. Whatever she said ended the debate. She knelt beside Martha, tipped the jug carefully, and let a few drops of water fall onto Martha's cracked lips. The water was warm, tasting of clay and herbs, but it might have been angel's tears for how sweet it seemed. Martha's swollen tongue moved desperately, seeking more. The girl allowed another small sip, then another, patient as a mother with an infant. The younger boy, perhaps 12, had been circling them, examining Martha with the fearless curiosity of his age. He pointed at her fair skin, reddened and peeling, and said something that made the others laugh. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from surprise. He touched his own brown arm, then pointed at hers again, clearly amazed by the difference. The eldest girl began issuing orders. She pulled a length of woven cloth from her basket and draped it over Martha's shoulders, careful not to press too hard on the burns. It smelled of sage and smoke, and though it was rough woven, it felt like the finest silk against Martha's abused skin. The younger girl had produced a small gourd from her basket, filled with some kind of paste. She began applying it to Martha's burns with infinite care, humming a little song as she worked. The paste was cool and numbing, drawing the fire from Martha's skin. Meanwhile, the boys had made a decision. The elder one squatted beside Martha and spoke slowly, as if to a child. When she didn't respond, he sighed and made gestures, pointing to himself, then to her, then making a lifting motion. Did she understand? They would carry her. Martha tried to nod, managed only a slight movement. It was enough. The boy called to his companion, and together they fashioned a sort of travois from long sticks they found nearby, and the blanket from the older girl's basket. They worked with practiced efficiency, as if carrying half-dead strangers was an everyday occurrence. When they tried to move her onto the makeshift stretcher, Martha bit back a scream. Every movement was agony, her burned skin protesting, her muscles cramped from a night of cold. The younger girl made soothing sounds, stroking Martha's matted hair with gentle fingers. They lifted her as carefully as they could, the two boys carrying the poles while the girls walked alongside. The older girl held the water jug to Martha's lips whenever they paused, never giving too much at once. The younger one kept up a steady stream of chatter, her voice musical even in that unknown tongue. As they walked, Martha drifted in and out of consciousness. She caught glimpses of the landscape changing, the harsh gulch giving way to softer hills dotted with mesquite and sage. Once, she saw the older boy point to tracks in the dust and say something that made the others look around warily. They moved faster after that. The sun was high when they stopped at a small spring hidden among the rocks. The children set Martha down gently and went about what seemed to be a familiar routine. The boys refilled the water jugs while the girls continued tending to Martha's wounds. The younger girl produced strips of dried meat from her pouch, soaked a piece in water until it softened, and placed tiny shreds between Martha's lips. It was then that Martha got a good look at her rescuers. They wore simple leather and cloth garments, decorated with beadwork and quills. The boys had their hair in long braids, while the girls wore theirs loose with ornamental ties. They were Comanche. She realized, the very people she'd been taught to fear above all others. Yet here they were, sharing their water, their food, their medicine with a stranger who by all rights should be their enemy. The younger boy offered her a shy smile when he caught her watching, and Martha felt tears leak from her swollen eyes. The older girl noticed and made a soft clicking sound with her tongue. She said something to the younger girl, who produced another gourd, this one containing a different substance. She painted it carefully around Martha's eyes, and the cooling relief was immediate. They stayed at the spring until the worst heat of the day passed. The children took turns watching the horizon while others dozed in the shade. Even in rest, they kept Martha covered and comfortable, adjusting the cloth when the sun moved, dribbling water between her lips at regular intervals. When shadows began to lengthen, they prepared to move again. This time, Martha found she could help a little, pushing with her feet as they lifted her onto the travois. The older boy nodded approval and said something that sounded encouraging. They traveled into the evening, following paths Martha couldn't see. The children moved with sure feet even as darkness began to fall, guided by landmarks invisible to her eyes. Stars emerged one by one, and the younger girl pointed them out to Martha, naming them in her language as if Martha were a younger sister being taught. Finally, they crested a low rise, and Martha saw the glow of fires in the distance. "A camp," the older girl called out. A high, carrying sound, and was answered from below. More voices joined in, adult voices now. Some curious, some alarmed. The boys carried Martha down the slope as people emerged from the gathering darkness. Women, men, elderly folks, more children, all talking at once, gesturing, pointing. Some faces showed suspicion, even anger. Martha couldn't blame them. She was white, the enemy, the invader. But the 4 children stood firm. The older girl spoke rapidly, gesturing at Martha's wounds, at the water jug, at the sun-scorched gulch they'd left behind. The younger girl actually stepped in front of Martha protectively when one man came too close, her small chin raised in defiance. An elderly woman pushed through the crowd, her face a map of years and wisdom. She studied Martha with sharp eyes, then questioned the children closely. Whatever they told her made her nod slowly. She spoke to the crowd, her voice carrying authority, and the tension eased fractionally. The old woman approached Martha, leaned close enough that Martha could smell the herbs in her hair. She touched Martha's forehead with one gnarled finger, looked into her eyes, then made what seemed to be a pronouncement. The crowd began to disperse, though many continued to stare and whisper. The children were allowed to carry Martha to a small shelter at the edge of camp. Inside, buffalo robes were piled soft and warm. The elderly woman followed, bringing a pot of something that smelled of meat and wild onions. She supervised as the children settled Martha on the furs, clucking her tongue at the extent of the burns and wounds. As exhaustion finally claimed her, Martha's last sight was of the 4 children sitting just outside the shelter's opening, apparently appointed as her guards. The younger girl was still humming that little song, a lullaby that transcended language. The older boy was sharpening his knife with steady strokes, ready to defend their strange find from any who might object. They had saved her. These children of the people she'd been taught were savages. Saved her when her own mother had thrown her away like spoiled meat, as sleep took her. Martha wondered if perhaps everything she'd believed about the world had been as wrong as her family's judgment of her worth. Martha woke to unfamiliar sounds, soft voices speaking that fluid language, the crackle of a fire, children laughing somewhere nearby. Her body ached, but it was the dull throb of healing rather than the sharp agony of fresh wounds. Someone had been tending her while she slept. The elderly woman sat beside her, grinding something in a stone bowl. She looked up when Martha stirred, her weathered face creasing into what might have been a smile. She spoke, her voice gentle but incomprehensible, and helped Martha sit up against a backrest of rolled furs. Daylight filtered through the shelter's opening, revealing details Martha had been too exhausted to notice before. The dwelling was made of buffalo hide stretched over wooden poles, surprisingly spacious and clean. Painted symbols decorated the inner walls: horses, stars, geometric patterns that seemed to tell stories she couldn't read. The old woman offered her a wooden bowl filled with thin porridge. Martha's hands shook as she took it, but she managed to drink without spilling. The taste was unfamiliar, cornmeal mixed with something wild and nutty, seasoned with herbs. Her stomach, empty for so long, cramped at first, then settled. A shadow fell across the entrance. The younger girl from yesterday peeked in, her face bright with curiosity. The old woman spoke to her, and she entered carrying a bundle of clothes. She set them down and began chattering to Martha, apparently explaining something important while gesturing at the garments. The clothes were simple but well made. A soft leather dress decorated with modest beadwork, leggings, and moccasins. The girl helped Martha change, careful of her still tender skin. The native clothing felt strange but comfortable, nothing like the restrictive corsets and heavy skirts she'd worn all her life. Over the following days, Martha learned the rhythm of her new existence. The old woman, whom the children called something that sounded like hutsu, took charge of her care. She applied poultices that drew out infection, fed her broths that gradually grew heartier, and spoke to her constantly despite the language barrier. The 4 children visited daily. Martha learned their names through repetition and gestures. The older boy was Pabi, serious and protective. His sister Tabe was the elder girl, practical and kind. The younger boy, Kaku, had an irrepressible grin and a talent for mimicry. The littlest, Nami, had appointed herself Martha's special guardian. rarely leaving her side during daylight hours. Slowly, Martha began to understand words. Water was pa, food was tukapu. The old woman taught her like a patient grandmother, pointing and repeating until Martha could ask for basic needs. Each small victory, correctly naming an object, understanding a simple command, was met with approval from her teachers. Not everyone was pleased with her presence. Some adults watched her with open suspicion, especially the warriors who passed by the shelter. One woman in particular, middle-aged with a scar across her cheek, often stood outside speaking harshly to Hutsu. The old woman always responded calmly, but Martha could feel the tension. One morning, perhaps 2 weeks after her arrival, the scarred woman entered the shelter uninvited. She grabbed Martha's arm, examining her pale skin with disgust, and spat a stream of words that needed no translation. Hatred was a universal language, but before Martha could react, little Nami flew at the woman like an angry sparrow, shouting and pushing. Taby appeared moments later, adding her voice to the conflict. The scarred woman raised her hand as if to strike the children, and Martha found herself moving despite her weakness, placing herself between them. The gesture stopped everyone cold. The scarred woman stared at Martha, something shifting in her expression. She said something quieter, almost a question. Hutsu, who had arrived at the commotion, answered at length. The woman looked at Martha once more, shook her head, and left. She lost 2 sons to white soldiers, Taby said later, using the few English words she knew combined with gestures. Her heart is... She made a breaking motion with her hands. Martha understood. Loss transcended language barriers. She thought of her own losses, not of children, but of the possibility of them, of her place in the only world she'd known. Perhaps that was why Hutsu had taken pity on her. The old woman had recognized a kindred spirit in grief. As Martha grew stronger, she was expected to contribute. Hutsu taught her to scrape hides, a back-breaking task that left her hands raw at first. She learned to gather plants with the women, memorizing which were food, which were medicine, which were poison. Her pale skin burned again in the sun, then gradually darkened to a light tan that marked her as forever different, but at least better protected. The children remained her closest allies. Pabi taught her to recognize animal tracks and the signs of weather changes. Kaku showed her how to find water in dry places. Tebe instructed her in beadwork, laughing gently when Martha's clumsy fingers produced crooked patterns. Anami simply loved her with the uncomplicated affection of a child who had chosen her family. One evening, as the camp prepared for a ceremony Martha didn't understand, Hutsu dressed her in finer clothes and painted symbols on her face with red ochre. She led Martha to the central fire where the entire band had gathered. Martha's heart pounded, uncertain what was happening. An elder man, his hair white as snow, spoke at length. Martha caught a few words. Stranger, children, gift, spirit. Then Hutsu led her forward and placed Martha's hand on a decorated staff. The old woman spoke, her voice carrying across the assembled people. Later, Tebe explained as best she could. Martha had been formally adopted into the band. Not as Comanche, she would always be other, but as someone under their protection, brought by the spirits through the agency of children. It was unusual, perhaps unprecedented, but the children's advocacy and Martha's own defense of them had swayed opinion. That night, Martha wept for the first time since her rescue, not from sorrow, but from a gratitude so profound it shook her to her bones. These people, who had every reason to hate her kind, had given her what her own blood denied, a place to belong. She learned their ways weren't soft. Life was hard. Constant movement following the buffalo, warfare with other tribes and white settlers alike. But there was also laughter, storytelling around fires, children playing elaborate games, women supporting each other through births and deaths and daily struggles. Martha found her place among them slowly. Her skill with a needle, learned in her former life, translated well to hidework. She had a good eye for patterns and soon was creating beadwork that earned approving nods. Her inability to bear children, the curse that had condemned her in white society, meant nothing here where she could be an aunt to all children, a daughter to Hutsu, a sister to the women who gradually accepted her presence. 3 months after her rescue, Martha spoke enough Comanche to hold simple conversations. She told Hutsu about her abandonment, using a mixture of words and gestures. The old woman listened without judgment, then told her own story: husband killed in a raid, children lost to disease, grandchildren scattered to other bands. They were 2 women hollowed out by loss, filling each other's empty spaces. "You are not Barren," Hutsu said one night, touching Martha's chest over her heart. "Here grows many things: love, strength, wisdom. The spirits knew. That's why they sent our children to find you." Martha thought of her mother's last words, of being called cursed and worthless. Here, she was Martha who was found. Martha who stands between. Martha of 2 worlds. The names held power, possibility, purpose. When winter came, she knew she would not leave when spring arrived. This was home now. These people her family, not the family of blood that had rejected her, but the family of choice that had claimed her. She was still broken in the ways her mother had condemned. But here, broken things were mended with patience and skill, made useful again, sometimes even beautiful. She watched Nami playing with a doll made of corn husks and scraps of leather, singing that same little song she'd hummed over Martha's burned body months ago. A lullaby of belonging, of finding your place in the vast, hard world. Martha hummed along, finally understanding the words: "Sleep now, little one. You are home. You are loved. You are home." The spring buffalo hunt had taken the band far from their winter grounds, following the herds north toward the Red River country. Martha rode alongside the other women, her seat on the painted pony now steady and sure. 6 months among the Comanche had transformed her from a dying cast-off into something altogether different, not quite Indian, never fully white again, but something in between that had its own strength. She was helping Tabi repair a travois when the scouts came galloping back to camp, their faces grim. White men approaching. Not soldiers, but civilians from the settlements. Maybe 20 riders, armed and asking questions about a white woman. Martha's blood turned cold. Hutsu found her immediately, reading the fear in her face. "They come for you," the old woman said. It wasn't a question. The band's chief, a weathered warrior named Peta Nokona, called a council. Martha wasn't permitted to attend, but she could hear the raised voices, the debate raging. Some wanted a fight. Others counseled negotiation. A few suggested simply sending her back to avoid bloodshed. Nami crept to Martha's side, clutching her hand. "You won't leave us?" the girl whispered in Comanche. Martha couldn't answer. The choice might not be hers to make. When the white riders appeared on the ridge above camp, Martha recognized the lead figure immediately, Sheriff Tom Bradley from her hometown, his tin star glinting in the afternoon sun. Beside him rode her brother Jake, and behind them, shockingly, her mother. The meeting took place in the open ground between the camp and the riders. Chief Peta Nokona brought several warriors and Hutsu as translator. Martha was made to come forward, dressed in her Comanche clothing, her hair now long and braided, her skin darkened by months of sun. Her mother's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disgust, something that might have been regret but was quickly suppressed. Jake spat tobacco juice and surveyed the camp with the calculating eyes of a man counting enemies. "Martha Briggs," Sheriff Bradley called out, "these good people have come to take you home. They say you were taken captive by these savages." Martha found her voice. "I was not taken. I was saved." A murmur ran through the white men. Her mother stepped her horse forward. "Look at you," she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of disgust. "Living like an animal. Have you no shame?" "No more shame than when you left me to die," Martha replied. The words came out steady, stronger than she felt. Jake's hand moved to his gun. "She's been corrupted, probably participated in their heathen rituals. No decent white woman would choose to stay." Sheriff Bradley raised a hand for silence. "Now, Mrs. Briggs says you wandered off in distress after your husband's abandonment, got lost in the desert. These Indians must have found you and held you prisoner." "That's a lie." Martha stepped forward, feeling the protective presence of the warriors at her back. "She dragged me to Scorpion Gulch. They all did. Mother, Jake, William, even Lucy. Left me there with no water, no food, no clothing. Left me to die because I couldn't bear children." The sheriff's expression flickered. Some of the riders exchanged glances. Even in 1876, abandoning a woman to die was beyond the pale of civilized behavior. Martha's mother's face had gone red. She's always been touched in the head. Now these savages have filled her with delusions. As her mother, I demand you return her to proper society where she can receive Christian care. "I am not leaving," Martha said clearly. "These people took me in when my own blood threw me away. They are my family now." Jake cursed. "No sister of mine lives with savages." He looked at the sheriff. "We have the right to take her back. Willing or not, she's clearly not in her right mind." Chief Peta Nokona spoke then, his deep voice carrying authority, though only Hutsuo understood the words. The old woman translated. "The chief says the woman came to us dying. Our children found her and brought her to safety. She has been adopted into our band by her own choice. You have no claim on her. White law says different." Jake snarled. "She belongs with her own kind. Her own kind tried to kill her," Hutsu said in heavily accented English, surprising everyone. "We know this truth. The spirits know. The earth where you left her knows." Martha's mother had dismounted now, approaching slowly. "Martha, please, think of your immortal soul. These heathens will drag you to damnation. Come home. We'll find you a place, maybe with the church. Some useful work." "Useful work?" Martha laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Like dying in a gulch because my womb is empty? No, Mother, I have useful work here. I have children who love me, elders who value me, sisters who stand beside me. I have everything you said I could never have." As if summoned, Nami darted forward, wrapping her arms around Martha's waist. Taby and her brothers emerged from the crowd, forming a protective circle. Even the scarred woman who had once spat at Martha stepped forward, hand on her knife. The gesture wasn't lost on the white men. Hands drifted to weapons on both sides. The air grew thick with potential violence. Sheriff Bradley, who seemed to be the only one interested in avoiding bloodshed, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Briggs, I need to hear it clear. Are you staying of your own free will?" "I am. You understand you'll be giving up your place in civilized society. No white settlement will accept you after this. You'll be marked as an Indian lover, same as if you were tainted." Martha met his eyes steadily. "Sheriff, civilized society gave up on me first. These people you call savages showed me more Christianity than I ever found in church. Yes, I choose to stay." Her mother made one last attempt. "What about children? Martha, you'll never have babies of your own. Don't you want a real family?" Martha looked down at Nami, still clinging to her, then at the 4 young faces who had saved her life. "I have children," she said softly. "Maybe not from my body, but mine all the same, and that's more than you ever let me hope for." Something broke in her mother's face then, perhaps the first real emotion Martha had seen there, but it was too late for repentance. The woman turned and walked back to her horse, mounting stiffly. Jake wasn't finished. "This ain't over. No sister of mine. I am no sister of yours." Martha cut him off. "You made that clear at Scorpion Gulch. Tell William, tell Lucy, tell everyone. Martha Briggs died in that desert. The woman standing here has a different name, a different life, a different family, one that doesn't measure worth by the fruit of a womb." The standoff stretched taut. Warriors notched arrows. White men fingered triggers. Children were quietly moved to the back of the camp. Finally, Sheriff Bradley spoke. "I'll report that Martha Briggs was found living with the Comanche of her own will and refused rescue. That's all the law requires of me." He looked at Jake and Martha's mother. "I suggest we leave before blood gets spilled over a woman who's made her choice clear." Jake looked ready to argue, but something in the sheriff's face stopped him. Maybe it was the realization that even if they forced Martha back, the scandal would ruin them. A woman who chose Indians over her own kind? The shame would be worse than her barrenness ever was. They turned their horses, but Martha's mother looked back one last time. Their eyes met across the divide of two worlds, and Martha saw something there. Regret, perhaps, or just the bitter knowledge that she'd thrown away her daughter for nothing. Then she was gone, following the men back toward the settlements and the narrow life Martha had escaped. The camp erupted in celebration and relief. Warriors whooped their victory cries. Women embraced Martha, welcoming her as truly one of them now, she who had chosen them over her birth people. That night, as the campfire burned high and stories were told of the day's confrontation, Hutsu sat beside Martha. "Now you know," the old woman said. "You are ours, and we are yours. Not because you had no choice, but because you chose us even when they came for you. This is the strongest bond, the family we choose." Martha watched Nami dancing with the other children around the fire, her laughter bright as stars. Pabi and Kaku were reenacting the confrontation for an appreciative audience, making the white men look foolish and scared. Tabe sat nearby, working on a special dress, a gift for Martha, decorated with symbols of belonging and protection. She had lost the family that birth had given her, but gained one that choice had made, and in that choosing, Martha found she was not barren at all, but rich beyond measure in all the ways that truly mattered. The cattle appeared on the horizon like a dark river flowing across the prairie, their lowing carried on the wind long before the dust cloud reached the Comanche camp. Martha was helping Tabe stretch a fresh buffalo hide when Pabi came running, his young face tight with concern. "Tejanos," he said, using the word for Texan cowboys. "Many cattle, coming this way." It wasn't unusual for cattle drives to pass through Comanche territory, but the herds usually kept their distance from known camping grounds. This one seemed to be heading straight for them, either by accident or design. Chief Peta Nokona sent scouts to investigate. They returned with news that 3 cowboys had separated from the main drive, seeking permission to water their horses at the stream near camp. One rode ahead of the others, a tall man on a paint horse, his hat pulled low against the sun. Martha paid little attention at first. White men were to be avoided when possible, tolerated when necessary. She had no desire to encounter more of her former people, not after the confrontation with her family months ago. But Hutsu asked her to come translate, as her English was still better than most in the band. The lead cowboy had dismounted by the stream when Martha approached with several warriors. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with sun-weathered features and careful eyes. Unlike many white men who came through, he'd removed his hat in respect and kept his hands visible, away from his weapons. "Name's Ben Garrett," he said, his voice carrying a slight Tennessee drawl. "Trail boss for the Lazy J outfit. We're pushing 3,000 head to Kansas. Don't mean any trouble. Just need water and maybe to trade for supplies if you're willing." Martha translated, noting how his eyes widened slightly when she spoke. He'd expected many things, but not a white woman in Comanche dress speaking perfect English. "You're welcome to water," she said after consulting with the warriors. "Trading must be approved by our chief." He nodded, then studied her with frank curiosity. "Pardon my asking, ma'am, but are you—" "I am where I choose to be." Martha cut him off, the response automatic after months of practice. Something in her tone made him step back. "No offense meant, just surprised is all." He paused, then added, "Truth is, I envy you some, the freedom of it." That caught her off guard. Most whites who learned of her choice reacted with disgust or pity, not envy. She looked at him more closely. Beneath the trail dust and stubble was a face marked by its own losses, lines that spoke of grief around his eyes, a tightness to his mouth that suggested words held back. The other cowboys had arrived, a Mexican vaquero named Carlos, and a young hand who couldn't have been more than 17. They watered their horses in silence, stealing glances at the camp and at Martha. Ben Garrett kept his eyes on his horse, but Martha felt his awareness of her like heat from a fire. Over the next 2 days, while the main herd passed slowly by at a respectful distance, Ben came to trade. He brought coffee, sugar, ammunition, valuable goods that Chief Peta no Kona accepted in exchange for dried meat and moccasins. But Martha noticed he always found reasons to linger, to ask questions that required her translation. On the second evening, he found her alone by the stream, washing clothes. He approached carefully, making noise so as not to startle her. "I should tell you," he said without preamble. "I lost my wife and daughter 2 years back. Cholera took them while I was on a drive. Came home to 2 graves and an empty house." Martha's hands stilled in the water. She understood now why he'd looked at her with recognition rather than judgment. He knew what it was to have your world torn away. "I'm sorry," she said simply. He shrugged, the gesture of a man who'd learned to carry weight without showing it. "After that, I couldn't stay in one place. Took to the trails full time. The boys think I'm dedicated to the work, but truth is, I'm just running. Running doesn't change what's behind you," Martha said. "No," he agreed. "But sometimes you run long enough, you find something else, maybe something you weren't even looking for." Their eyes met across the deepening twilight. Martha felt something stir that she'd thought her barrenness had killed. Not desire exactly, but possibility. The chance for connection with someone who understood loss. "You'd best get back to your herd," she said, standing. "The warriors get nervous when white men linger after dark." He touched his hat brim. "Yes, ma'am, but I was wondering. We'll be coming back this way in 3 months. After selling the herd, might you still be here?" "We follow the buffalo," Martha said. "Only the spirits know where we'll be." But she was lying. They would be here. This was their summer ground, near water and good hunting. She could see in his eyes that he knew it too. He left something on a rock by the stream. A small carved wooden horse, the kind a father might make for a child. Martha picked it up after he'd gone, running her fingers over the smooth wood. She thought of his empty house, his graves, his endless trails leading nowhere and everywhere. That night, Hutsu noticed the carving. The old woman said nothing, but her knowing look spoke volumes. Tabe was less subtle. "The tall cowboy watches you," she said as they worked side by side the next morning. "He has sad eyes, but they become less sad when he sees you." "He's white," Martha said, as if that settled everything. "So are you," Tabe replied practically. "Under the sun darkening, under the clothes, the heart chooses what it chooses." But Martha had learned to distrust her heart. It had once chosen Samuel Briggs, who'd cast her aside for fertile ground. It had believed in family bonds that proved as fragile as spring ice. What trust could she place in the stirring she felt when Ben Garrett looked at her with those grave, understanding eyes? The herd moved on, taking Ben with it, but he'd left more than the carved horse. He'd left questions Martha couldn't quite push aside. Was she meant to live forever between worlds? Never fully of either. Could there be a bridge between the life she'd chosen and the possibility he represented? Nami found her one evening, sitting apart from the camp, turning the wooden horse over in her hands. "Are you sad? Second mother?" the child asked, using the name she'd given Martha. "Not sad," Martha said, pulling the girl close. "Just thinking about the cowboy man. Papi says he looked at you like father looks at mother when they think no one sees." Martha smiled despite herself. "Papi sees too much. Will he come back?" "He said he would. Will you go with him if he does?" The question hit Martha like a physical blow. "This is my home," she said. "You are my family. I would never leave you." But even as she said it, she wondered if life would really let her choices be so simple. She'd learned that the heart could be barren in one way, but fertile in others. That families could be made by choice rather than blood. Now she was learning that even in the vast openness of Comanche life, the past had ways of finding you, bringing possibilities you'd thought forever closed. She carried the wooden horse in her medicine bag, next to the herbs Hutsu had taught her to gather. Sometimes at night, she took it out and held it, wondering about the hands that had carved it, the grief that had shaped them, the hope that had brought them to her stream. 3 months. By then the summer heat would be breaking, the buffalo moving south. The band would be preparing for autumn hunts and winter camps. And somewhere on the wide prairie, a man with sad eyes would be looking for a camp by a stream, carrying his own questions about bridges between worlds. Martha touched the horse one more time, then put it away. Whatever came, she would meet it as she'd learned to meet everything, with strength drawn from suffering, wisdom earned through loss, and the knowledge that home was not a place but the people who claimed you when the world cast you out. The first sign of trouble came with the dawn mist. Riders on the horizon, too many to count in the gray half-light. Martha woke to the sound of running feet, warriors calling to each other in urgent tones. She grabbed her knife and rushed from Hutsu's lodge to find the camp already in motion. "White men," Pabi told her, his young face grim as he strung his bow. "Many, with guns." It wasn't the army. Their scouts would have reported soldiers long before they got this close. These were civilians, a mob from the settlements, and Martha's heart sank as she recognized the type. She'd seen such groups before, when she was white, men who'd lost cattle to raids, or whose kinfolk had been killed in the ongoing warfare between Texans and Comanches. Men looking for any Indians to punish, regardless of guilt. Chief Peta Nokona was already organizing the defense. Women and children were to flee to the ravine behind camp, while warriors held the attackers. But there were too few fighting men. Many were away on a hunt, and the whites had superior numbers and weapons. Martha found herself torn between worlds again. These attackers were what she'd once been. Yet they would kill her now as readily as any Comanche. The children who'd saved her life were in mortal danger. Her choice was no choice at all. "I can try to talk to them," she told the chief through Hutsu. "They might listen to a white woman." Peta Nokona's eyes were hard as flint. "They come for blood, not words. But try if you wish. It may buy time for the children to escape." Martha quickly changed into the most Anglo clothing she had, a plain dress traded from Mexican merchants, though still clearly of Indian make. She unbraided her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders. It was a thin disguise, but it might make them pause. The riders had stopped just outside rifle range, roughly 40 men armed with an assortment of weapons. Martha walked out to meet them, hands visible and empty, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she felt the drawn bows of the warriors, the held breath of the camp. The lead rider was a man she didn't recognize, red-faced, thick-bodied, with the look of a rancher who'd decided to take justice into his own hands. His eyes narrowed as she approached. "Well, well," he called out. "They sent their white captive to beg. You poor thing. How long they been holding you?" "I'm no captive," Martha said clearly. "I live here by choice. These people have done nothing to warrant attack. What grievance brings you here?" A murmur ran through the mob. Another man pushed forward, younger, with a bandaged arm. "Comanches hit the Broken Circle Ranch 3 nights back, killed 2 men, run off 30 horses. Their trail led this direction. This band has been camped here for 2 weeks, Martha said. "Check the fire pits if you doubt me. The raids you speak of weren't their doing. All Indians are the same." The leader spat. "If we can't find the guilty ones, these'll do for payment. Now you get back here, woman. We're taking you to safety whether you want it or not, and then we're cleaning out this nest of vipers." Martha stood her ground. "I won't let you harm innocent people. There are children here." "Nits make lice," someone shouted from the back, and Martha's blood went cold at the familiar phrase. She'd heard it before. The justification for slaughtering Indian children. "Please," she tried again. "I'm Martha Briggs from Sweetwater. Some of you might know my family. I'm telling you these aren't the raiders you seek." The red-faced leader laughed. "Martha Briggs, I heard about you. The Barren woman who went native. Your own mama disowned you. Why should we listen to a race traitor?" The words stung, but Martha had been called worse. She opened her mouth to respond when she heard hoofbeats behind her, a single rider approaching from the camp. Her heart sank. Which warrior had decided to force the issue? But it wasn't a warrior. It was Ben Garrett on his paint horse, still dusty from the trail, riding past her to face the mob. He'd returned early, arriving at the worst possible moment. "Morning, gentlemen," he said calmly, as if 40 armed men weren't pointing guns at him. "Tom Brewster, isn't it? I bought cattle from you last season." The red-faced man, Brewster, looked taken aback. "Garrett, what in blazes are you doing here?" "Came to trade for supplies," Ben said easily. "These folks have the best dried meat this side of the Brazos. Bad timing on my part. Seems like you're trading with hostiles?" "I'm trading with people who've dealt fairly with me." Ben's voice remained level, but Martha heard steel beneath it. "People who haven't bothered anybody in these parts. You want the raiders who hit Broken Circle? You should be looking 20 miles south. Different band entirely." "How would you know that?" "Because I've been trailing cattle through this country for 5 years. I know which bands range where. These are buffalo followers, led by Peta Nocona. The group that's been raiding is Yellow Horse's band. Young bucks mostly, breaking from the main tribe." Brewster shifted in his saddle. "Even if that's true, it is true." Ben cut him off. "And you know it. Tom, you're just here because it's easier to hit a family camp than track down actual warriors. How many children you planning to kill today to make yourself feel better about losing horses?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Some of the mob looked uncomfortable now, guns lowering slightly. Martha saw the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then someone fired. Martha never knew who shot first, a nervous trigger finger, perhaps, or deliberate murder, but suddenly the air was full of gunfire and arrows. Ben wheeled his horse, grabbing Martha and pulling her up behind him as bullets whined past. They raced for the camp as warriors provided covering fire. The battle was brief, but vicious. The mob had expected easy victims, not determined resistance. When 3 of their number fell, including the young man with the bandaged arm, they pulled back to regroup, but Martha knew they'd return, angry now and wanting revenge for their own dead. In the temporary lull, the camp evacuated. Women bundled children onto horses. Warriors gathered ammunition. Martha found herself working alongside Tabe, tying supplies while Ben and the warriors planned defense. "Why did you come back?" she asked him during a brief moment alone. "Couldn't stay away," he said simply. "Kept thinking about a woman brave enough to choose her own path. Figured maybe I could learn something about that. You may have gotten yourself killed for that lesson." He smiled grimly. "Wouldn't be the first time I've made a bad choice, but standing by while they slaughter innocents, that's a choice I couldn't live with." The mob attacked again near sunset, this time trying to flank the camp, but Peta Nocona had fought Texans for decades. He knew their tactics. The warriors had taken position in the rocks above the ravine, turning it into a death trap for anyone who entered. Martha found herself with a rifle, taken from a fallen attacker, defending alongside people who'd become her family. She saw Pabi, barely 14, fighting with the courage of a seasoned warrior. She saw Hoot Su calmly directing the defense of the non-combatants. She saw Ben Garrett, a white man defending Indians against his own kind, his face set with determination. The second attack broke like water against stone. Brewster, wounded now, called retreat. They'd lost 7 men to the Comanches too, and night was falling. Indian fighters feared darkness, when their advantages in numbers and weapons meant less. But everyone knew they'd be back with reinforcements. The camp would have to move, find safety deeper in Comanche territory. It meant leaving this precious water source, these hunting grounds, starting over somewhere else. As the warriors watched the surviving attackers disappear into the darkness, Martha stood with Ben looking at the cost of the day. Bodies that would need burial, wounded, requiring care. A peace shattered by hatred and misunderstanding. "I brought this on them," Martha said quietly. "If I hadn't been here, they might have talked their way out of it." "No," Ben said firmly. "Men like Brewster don't come to talk. You probably saved lives today by making them hesitate at first." He paused, then added, "You've got Sand, Martha Briggs. Not many would stand between 2 groups wanting to kill each other." "I've had practice standing between worlds," she said, thinking of all the times she'd felt caught between white and Comanche, between past and present, between the woman she'd been and the one she'd become. The evacuation continued through the night. By dawn, the camp would be gone, vanished into the vast plains like smoke. But the violence would follow them. It always did. The cycle of raid and retaliation that had bloodied the frontier for generations would continue. Martha helped Nami onto a travois, the little girl clutching her doll with white-knuckled fingers. Even children knew the price of survival in this hard land. As she turned to continue packing, she found Ben beside her, working without words to help her family escape. He'd made his choice. She realized, like her, he'd stepped between worlds, and there would be no easy way back. The question now was whether they'd stand between those worlds together, or whether the violence of the day would drive them apart like everything else the frontier touched. The band traveled for 3 days before making camp at Weeping Springs, a hidden valley known only to the Comanche. Here, protected by high canyon walls and with multiple escape routes, they could rest and tend their wounded. But the respite brought its own challenges, decisions that couldn't be put off any longer. Martha stood at the edge of camp as dawn broke, watching the horses graze in the meadow below. The violence at their previous camp had shattered something in her, or perhaps revealed what had always been true. She would never fully belong to either world. The whites saw her as a race traitor. The Comanche accepted her but would always know her as other. And now there was Ben, whose presence complicated everything. "You're troubled, daughter." Hootsu appeared beside her, moving with the silence that still amazed Martha after all these months. "I bring danger to the people," Martha said in Comanche. "My presence draws white anger like honey draws bears." The old woman snorted. "White anger needs no invitation. It comes regardless." She studied Martha with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "But this isn't about danger. It's about the cowboy." Martha couldn't deny it. Ben had stayed with them through the flight, helping defend the rear guard, sharing his ammunition and knowledge of white tactics. But his presence created its own tensions. Some warriors respected his courage, others questioned his motives, and Martha herself felt pulled in directions she couldn't name. "He asked me to speak with you," Hootsu continued. "He offers to leave if his presence brings harm, but first, he wishes to talk." Martha found Ben by the spring, watering his paint horse. He looked up at her approach, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of choices made and bridges burned. "Your chief says there's to be a council tonight," he said without preamble, "to decide whether I stay or go. Figured we should talk first." "What is there to say?" Martha kept her voice neutral, though her heart raced. "Plenty." He left the horse to graze and faced her fully. "Starting with the truth, I came back early because I couldn't stop thinking about you, a woman who chose her own path when everything said she couldn't, who found family where others saw only enemies." "And now you've chosen a path too," Martha said. "Defending Indians against whites. There's no going back from that." "I know." His smile was rueful. "Tom Brewster will spread the word. Ben Garrett's gone native, sided with hostiles against his own kind. Won't be able to show my face in most towns after this." "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Why throw away your world for people who aren't yours?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the valley. "Maybe because I realized my world was already gone. Has been since Sarah and little Mary died. I've been a ghost riding the trails, pretending I still belonged somewhere. But when I saw you that first time, translating at the stream, I recognized something." "What?" "Someone else living between worlds. Someone who'd lost everything but found a way to keep going." He met her eyes. "I'm tired of being a ghost, Martha. Tired of running from empty houses and graves I can't change." Martha felt tears threaten, pushed them back. "This life isn't easier. It's hard. Uncertain. We're hunted, hated by both sides sometimes. And I can't—" She stopped, the old shame rising. "Can't what?" "Can't give you children." The words came out harsh, bitter. That's why I'm here, remember? A barren woman, cast out for failing in the one thing that matters. Ben stepped closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his warmth. I had a child once, held her as she died, burning with fever, buried her with her mother in ground I'll never see again. His voice roughened. I don't need more children. Martha, I need a reason to wake up that isn't habit, a place to belong that isn't just wherever the herd happens to be. And you think that's here, with me? I think maybe we could build something new. Not white, not Comanche, but something in between. A life for people who don't fit in the neat boxes others make. Before Martha could respond, they heard commotion from the camp, riders approaching. But the sentry's call was welcoming, not alarmed. Martha and Ben hurried back to find unexpected visitors, a small party of Comancheros, the mixed-blood traders who served as go-betweens for the tribes and Mexican settlements. Their leader, a weathered man named Joaquin Morales, brought disturbing news. The attack on the band had stirred up the whole region. Brewster was indeed raising a larger force, claiming the Comanches had murdered innocent settlers. Worse, he was pushing for military involvement, painting Ben as a captive or traitor who needed rescuing. They planned to come in force, Joaquin told the assembled council that night. Maybe soldiers, maybe rangers. Either way, too many to fight. The debate that followed was heated. Some warriors wanted to strike first, raid the settlements in retaliation. Others counseled fleeing deeper into the Llano Estacado, the staked plains where whites feared to follow. And underlying it all was the question of the two whites in their midst. Finally, Chief Peta Nocona called Martha and Ben forward. The chief spoke slowly, allowing Hoot Suo to translate for Ben's benefit. You have both shown courage. You fought beside us, bled with us. But your presence brings complicated troubles. The council must know. What do you choose? It was the moment Martha had dreaded and expected. She looked around the fire-lit circle, at Pabi trying to appear warrior stern, at Tabe holding Nami, who watched with wide eyes, at Hoot Suo, patient and knowing, at all the faces that had become family. Then she looked at Ben, this unexpected man who'd thrown away his own world to stand with hers. I choose to stay with my family, she said clearly. If they'll have me, if it brings danger, I'll face it with them. But I understand if the people decide otherwise. Ben spoke next, his words careful. I've got no claim here except what I'm willing to earn. I can fight, hunt, tend horses. I know white ways, can help navigate their laws and tricks. If you'll have me, I'll stand with you. If not, I'll leave and try to draw their anger away with me. The council deliberated while Martha and Ben waited outside. She could hear raised voices, impassioned arguments. Her fate, their fate, being decided by others once again. But this time, it felt different. This wasn't abandonment in a desert. It was a community weighing difficult choices. When they were called back, Chief Peta Nocona's face was grave, but not unkind. The people are divided. Some say you bring more trouble than help. Others remember that our children brought you to us for a reason, that the spirits don't make mistakes. He paused, looking between them. So, we offer this choice. Stay with us and accept all that comes, good and bad, or leave with our blessing and what help we can give, to find your own path between worlds. Martha felt the weight of the moment. Stay and continue to endanger those she loved, leave and lose the only real family she'd known. She looked at Ben, saw her own uncertainty reflected there. It was Nami who broke the silence, pulling free from Tabi to run to Martha. Don't go, second mother, she pleaded in Comanche. Who will teach me beadwork? Who will tell me stories of the strange white world? Who will show me that different peoples can be family? And there it was, the answer, in a child's simple words. Martha knelt and embraced Nami, then stood to face the council. We are all living between worlds now, she said. Red and white, old ways and new. Maybe that's what the spirits intended, for us to learn to build bridges instead of walls. I choose to stay, to face whatever comes with my family. Ben stepped beside her. I've been alone long enough. If you'll have me, I choose to stay too, to learn your ways, to teach what I know, to stand between worlds with Martha and with all of you." The council voted. It was close, closer than Martha liked. But in the end, family won. Hutsuo smiled her rare smile. Pabi nodded approval like the warrior he was becoming. Tebe reached out to clasp Martha's hand. They would stay. They would face Brewster's mob or the army or whatever came, but they would face it together, a band already between worlds, now embracing two more souls who'd found home in the spaces others feared to walk. That night, as the camp settled into sleep, Martha stood with Ben under the vast Texas stars. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, its dangers. But tonight, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before her abandonment in Scorpion Gulch. The possibility of a future shaped by choice rather than circumstance. "No regrets?" she asked softly. "None," Ben replied. "For the first time in 2 years. None at all." In the distance, coyotes called to each other across the canyon, but their cries no longer sounded like mockery to Martha. Instead, they seemed to speak of survival, of finding your pack in unexpected places, of the fierce joy of belonging to something larger than yourself, even if that belonging came with a price. The first frost came early that year, silvering the grasslands around their new home. Martha stood in the doorway of the small cabin, watching the sun rise over the plains. The dwelling sat on a rise between two worlds, close enough to the Comanche winter camp to hear their morning songs, far enough from the nearest white settlement to avoid immediate trouble. Ben had built it with help from Pabi and Kaku, now grown taller and stronger in the 2 years since Martha's rescue. The boys had taught him their construction methods while he shared his knowledge of carpentry. The result was neither fully white nor Indian, a hybrid shelter with log walls and buffalo hide insulation. Glass windows traded from Comancheros and a smoke hole in the traditional style. "Coffee's ready," Ben called from inside, and Martha smiled at the domestic normalcy of it. They'd been married in both traditions, a Comanche ceremony that bound them to the tribe, and later, a quiet blessing from a Mexican priest who asked no questions about their unusual circumstances. As she turned to go inside, she saw riders approaching from the camp. Tebe led them, now a young woman of 16, with Nami beside her on a spotted pony. The girl who'd once hummed lullabies over Martha's burned body had grown into a confident rider, split between two mothers, her birth mother in the camp and Martha, her second mother who taught her English and the mysteries of reading. "Second mother," Nami called out in English, her accent musical. "Grandmother Hutsu says come quick. Visitors approach, white men, but flying a peace flag." Martha's peaceful morning shattered. In 2 years, they'd managed an uneasy balance. Brewster's promised army had never materialized, partly due to Ben's strategic letters to authorities explaining the true situation, partly because larger conflicts drew military attention elsewhere. But peace was always fragile on the frontier. She and Ben saddled their horses quickly, following the girls back to camp. They found the band already assembled, warriors ready but weapons lowered. The visitors, 3 men, waited at the prescribed distance, their white flag prominent. Martha's breath caught. The lead rider was Sheriff Bradley from her hometown, older now, his star still glinting. Beside him rode a young man she didn't recognize and, shockingly, her brother William. Chief Peter Nokana gestured for Martha and Ben to approach as translators. As they drew near, Martha saw how William had changed. Gone was the cruel certainty that had left her to die. His face showed years of hard weather and harder thoughts. "Martha," William said, his voice rough. "You look, well, I am well," she replied evenly. "What brings you here?" "William?" Sheriff Bradley cleared his throat. "Official business first. I'm here to inform Mr. Garrett that all charges against him have been dropped. Seems Tom Brewster's version of events didn't hold up when investigated. Several witnesses came forward saying the attack on the Comanche camp was unprovoked." Ben nodded carefully. "Appreciated, Sheriff, though I hadn't planned on coming back regardless." "Figured as much." Bradley's eyes moved between them. You two are legally married now. I hear. We are, Martha confirmed. Then this is yours. William spoke abruptly, pulling a leather folder from his saddlebag. Father's will. He died 6 months ago. Left the ranch to Jake and me, but there's a provision. Your dowry, the money that was supposed to go to Samuel Briggs when you married. Father never paid it after Samuel left. It's been sitting in the bank, growing interest. Martha stared at the papers, uncomprehending. Why bring this to me now? William dismounted slowly, his movement speaking of some old injury. Mother died last year on her deathbed. She told the truth. About Scorpion Gulch, about what we did. His voice cracked. I've been carrying that weight. Martha, we all have. Jake drinks himself stupid most nights. Lucy's husband left her, said he couldn't trust a woman from a family that would do such a thing. And you? Martha kept her voice neutral, though her heart raced. I got myself shot in a range war, lay there bleeding, thinking I was dying, and all I could see was your face that day, the way you looked at us when we left you. He met her eyes for the first time. I'm sorry. It ain't enough. Will never be enough. But I'm sorry. The third rider, young and nervous, spoke up. I'm James Hartley. Ma'am, from the bank. The dowry amount, with interest, comes to $873. Substantial sum. Your brother thought, that is, he insisted we bring it to you proper. $800, a fortune by frontier standards. Enough to buy cattle, build a real house, start a legitimate ranch. Martha looked at Ben, saw her own thoughts reflected there. Then she looked back at the camp, where her chosen family waited. I'll take it, she said finally. Not for me, but for them. She gestured to the camp. The people need supplies for winter, medicine, ammunition for hunting, maybe some cattle to start a herd. William's face showed surprise, then something like respect. You'd use your dowry for Indians? I'd use it for my family, Martha corrected. The one that took me in when my blood kin threw me away. Sheriff Bradley shifted uncomfortably. There's one more thing. The state's talking about a reservation system, trying to settle the Indian problem peaceful-like. There might be opportunities for folks who can stand between both sides, help with negotiations. Cages, Ben said flatly. That's what reservations are. Maybe, Bradley admitted. But the alternative is worse. The buffalo are dying out. The army's getting stronger. The old ways. He shrugged helplessly. Martha felt the weight of the future pressing down. She'd seen the changes already. Fewer buffalo each year. More settlers pushing west. The world shifting beneath their feet like sand. We'll think on it, she said diplomatically. But today, we're here, living as we choose. The meeting ended with awkward farewells. William lingered, seeming to want to say more, but Martha had given all the forgiveness she could manage, some wounds scarred too deep for full healing. As the white men rode away, Martha and Ben returned to find the camp buzzing with discussion. Chief Peta called council to discuss the sheriff's words about reservations, about the changing world, that night, in their cabin between worlds. Martha and Ben counted the money by lamplight. It seemed both a fortune and a pittance against the challenges ahead. We could leave, Ben said quietly. Take this money. Go somewhere new, California maybe, or Oregon. Start fresh where nobody knows our story. Martha considered it. They could disappear into the growing West, become just another pioneer couple. But then she thought of Nami's laughter, of Hootsuu's patient teaching, of Taby's fierce loyalty, of Pabi and Kaku growing into fine young men. This is our story, she said finally. All of it. The ugly beginning, the unexpected middle. Whatever ending comes, I won't run from it. Ben smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. Didn't think you would. Just wanted to make sure we're choosing this with eyes open. A knock at the door interrupted them. Nami entered, carrying a bundle. Grandmother Hootsuu sent this, she said in her mixed English Comanche way. For your home. Inside was a beautifully woven blanket, decorated with symbols Martha now knew how to read, the sign for family, for protection, for bridges between sky and earth. Worked into the pattern were new symbols. A wooden horse like the one Ben had carved. 4 small figures representing the children who'd started it all. And in the center, 2 intertwined paths becoming one. "Tell grandmother we're honored," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. After Nami left, they spread the blanket across their bed. Outside, they could hear both worlds, distant cattle lowing from a ranch, nearby drums from the Comanche camp. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The buffalo would continue disappearing. The frontier would keep closing. The choices would grow harder. But tonight, in their small cabin on the borderland, Martha and Ben had everything that mattered. They had chosen their place, difficult as it was. They had family, unconventional as it might be. They had love, tested by loss and strengthened by understanding. Martha thought of her mother's cruel words in Scorpion Gulch. "A barren woman ain't no woman at all." How wrong she'd been. Martha's life overflowed with richness her mother could never understand. She was mother to children not her own, bridge between peoples, keeper of stories that might otherwise be lost. As dawn approached, painting the frost-covered plains in shades of gold and rose, Martha stood once more in her doorway. Ben joined her, his arm warm around her shoulders. In the distance, smoke rose from the Comanche camp's morning fires. Below in the valley, a small herd of cattle grazed, their first purchase with the dowry money, shared between the cabin and the camp. "No regrets?" Ben asked, echoing her question from that night 2 years ago. "None," Martha said, and meant it. "We are exactly where we're meant to be." The sun climbed higher, burning away the frost, revealing the harsh and beautiful land that had made them who they were. Somewhere in the distance, Nami's voice rose in song, that same lullaby she'd hummed over a dying woman who'd become her second mother. But now Martha understood all the words. "Sleep now, little one. You are home. You are loved. You are home." And she was.